Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. In this episode, Dorsey interviews another special guest that will give you hope and inspire you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of the Dorsey Ross Show. Today we have a special guest with us. They are Annette and Mark Anderson. And Annette and Mark, we thank you for coming on the show today to share your story.
Thank you, Dorsey. We are thrilled to be here.
Well, we thank you for, coming on. Now, tell us a brief introduction to who Annette and Mark Anderson are.
Okay, well, we've been married for 37 years. We consider ourselves best friends. We've raised 4 children who are now adults, and we're kind of living the dream of the two of us just here by ourselves. We actually have an organization called Cairn the Load, Cairn, Cairn the Load. Cairn, if you've ever been hiking, and we love to hike, we live near the mountains here in Utah. And when you hike, sometimes you'll see stacked rocks. And stacked rocks are often referred to as a cairn.
They're a trail marker. They're there to let us know that someone's been there before. Someone's been on this trail. Someone understands. And, it points you in the direction to go. And so that's really why we have created this organization, because of life experiences. We want individuals to know out there that they're not alone.
We talk to a lot of people, and the people that we talk to very often feel like, boy, no one has ever gone through this experience before. And we're here to let them know that not only have there been countless others who have gone through the same experiences, but that there have been lessons learned along the way. Dorsey, sometimes in life, we have experiences that if we have somebody else there to help us to understand and to get through those hard times, life can be so much better. And that's what we try to do with Cairn the Load. And we have our own podcast as well called Trail Angels. And we talk about hope. There's a lot of frustration that goes on in the world. And I don't want to talk gloom and doom, because that's not what life is. Life can be a wonderful thing, but sometimes we have to go through the problems in order to better understand what our life can be. And it's through some of those struggles that we're here today. We lost a 21-year-old son a few years ago from the results of a brain tumor.
And that was a long journey for us, a journey that the type of malformation he had in his brain was unique in the location of where it was at. So it made it difficult. It was impossible, actually, to eradicate it through typical treatments of gamma knife, radiation, or chemotherapy wasn't treated with that. And so it was only through advancement in technology, really, that after 8 years of dealing with the suffering and the pain and the not knowing of when is this going to take his life, and how much worse is it going to get before he's out of this pain, and will he ever get better? That technology advanced, and he was the 6th in the world that they tried this new surgical procedure. And they told us, our son was 16 at the time, and they told us it had to be perfect for him to come out of this surgery with the ability, well, 1, to be alive, 2, the ability to walk or to talk, all these things. And I remember sitting there in the neurosurgeon's office, and it was in December, and he's drawing on the sheet of paper. They'll put the paper down on the exam table, and he's drawing on there, kind of telling us how they'll go in and what they need to do. And he was explaining all the risks. And my son said, I want it out. I don't care. I want it out. I understand the risks, but I can't keep going like this too. And as a mother, knowing that, the risks for this surgery were really high, but I also understood that my son, it was his life. And he had, he was 16 and he'd been living with this for a long time. And I just shook my head and said, if that's what you want to do. Mark was out of town on a business trip and with meetings, and this appointment with our doctor just kind of happened overnight. They called us early one morning and said, can you come in? And so he wasn't there with us at the time, but boy, I honor those personal decisions. We got a bonus 5 years after that surgery. It wasn't perfect, but they learned a lot. The doctors learned a lot from this procedure and this surgery with our son that I pray has been a benefit and helped them going forward in treating other children and other adults who may have a tumor like this. And we've learned a lot, Dorsey. And you know, Dorsey, you've taught us a lot with your life. You know, we talk about trail angels and being there and helping people on their journey. And that's exactly what you are. You know, your life has been one miracle after another. And I think, honestly, all of our lives are full of miracles if we're willing to search and to see the miracles in our life and to focus on those things and not just the hardships.
Right, absolutely. And I think sometimes there's a lot of us out there that, you know, we feel alone. We feel that we're the only ones that have gone on this trip before. And, you know, I go on Facebook and I go on the pages that, you know, have people with my disability and with similar disabilities. And they're like, you know, people are on there, they're like, wow, I never met anybody else with my son or my daughter's disability. You know, it's great to connect with people. And do you guys, with Cairn the Load, do you guys have, you know, small groups or, you know, some type of ministry or organization where you connect with other people to speak to them?
You know, Dorsey, one of the things that gives us great satisfaction in doing what we do is seeing the comments that people put on Instagram or on Facebook, or they comment on the podcasts that we do. And when we talk about ministries, we believe that Cairn the Load really is a ministry in and of itself. We have about 30,000 people on our Instagram posts, and it's interesting the comments that people will make saying, "You'll never know just how important this particular post was to me today," and it's helped us to recognize, especially since COVID, that every single person in the world deals with difficulties one way or another. They might be emotional issues, they might be physical issues, they might be spiritual issues. But all of those issues that we deal with have the ability to make themselves better if we put out the effort to do so. You know, I think about opposition, and everybody has opposition in their life. And we really need to understand that opposition is essential to happiness. And it's our choice in life with the challenges that come that we choose happiness. We can become better or we can become bitter. And we've seen that a lot with people, is that you've got a choice to make. When you have something that doesn't quite go right, you have that ability to become better or bitter. And so our ministry per se is specific to what we do every single day. And just like everyone else, all of us can have our own personal ministry one way or another, just by making people realize that they're not alone. You do a great job of that, Dorsey, and we try to follow in people like your footsteps in trying to help people understand that it's okay. Everybody goes through these difficulties.
It is. And back to the question, do we have a group? Yes, we have a Facebook group that we'd love to have people join that, Cairn the Load. But we also, in our bio, in our link, and hopefully, Dorsey, you can actually provide this to the listeners in your show notes. But we'd love to visit with anyone. And on there's a link that I believe we call it a discovery call. And it's just a free call. They can go in and they'll see our calendar and they can schedule, a time where we can chat and see if we can, offer some hope in their life and just to help them realize that they're not alone. And so this is something that we really feel like, honestly, we've been called to do this, to help lift another, that we didn't go through these challenging experiences in our life just for us. And if we can help even just one feel a little bit lighter, feel some hope, feel loved and encouraged, then we feel like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when it comes to social media, we sometimes, put a post out on Instagram, we put a post out on Facebook, and, we may only get, one or two posts, for, one or two likes or one comment for that day. And we wonder, well, we didn't reach that many people, but that doesn't really matter. As long as we reach that one person that needs to be, inspired and needs to be encouraged by that statement, we did what God wanted us to do for that day.
Exactly.
You talk about people feeling broken, and you talk about going from broken to beautiful. How would someone go from being broken to being beautiful, and what does broken actually mean?
Well, it's an interesting question. And this is something that I learned personally as I was preparing to speak to a group of women in our church. And I was having a difficult time, honestly, preparing this message. And one morning in my preparation, I knew I needed to finalize this. I needed to nail down that message today. And in this preparation, I started thinking about a vessel. And I was thinking about how often, this vessel, it's created. And if we wanted to look at it spiritually in ministry, in the potter's hand, and they create this vessel. Well, sometimes things happen in life that create cracks and maybe even shatter us. And I started thinking more and more about this concept. And then I had this memory of our son. Now, our son loved his scars. And we never could understand. So he had this scar from the tip of his, head, clear down past his ear, and he kept his hair super short.
So people could see his scar.
So people could see his scar. And that scar actually it was almost like PTSD for me whenever I saw it. It brought back the memories of him lying in the hospital bed, and, all the lovely sights of different things and surgeries and procedures. So it brought back pain for me. And I could never understand why he was so proud of those scars. And then all of a sudden I started thinking about, in the same time, it was like this movie that was going super fast in my mind. And I'm seeing my son in these pictures. And then all of a sudden I see myself and how I hide my scars. And, whether it was a broken heart, whether, just things that had happened in my life that caused pain, that maybe even shattered me. I had experienced some abuse as a young gal. And so, all those things affect you in your development. And then I started thinking, well, what's the difference between his scars and my scars? And why would he be so proud of his? And then I realized it was a badge. His scars actually represented what he overcame. And as I started to ponder and to think, and really as I shared this message with these women, and I could see that they could resonate, it was resonating with them, that, all these things in life that we think make us less than, that we think that what if someone knew this about us? They wouldn't love us anymore, or they wouldn't this or that. None of us are perfect. And I realized that, what, my scars are also representation of what I have overcome, of what I have experienced. The representation, the healing that put me back together came through, I believe, through Christ, through Jesus Christ, and mending me. And I became stronger. I became more beautiful than I ever was before, because it was those experiences that helped me to become who I am. So it became this beautiful analogy of life and life's experiences, that one, we're not here to do it alone. Two, we're all going to be broken in some way. That's what life is, to come here and have experiences, and experiences that teach us and help us to become who we are. And And it really, the healing that has taken place. Now, on the outside, I don't think I look any different, but on the inside, I feel whole. I do feel more beautiful. Those things that made me feel less than, I've changed my mind. My mind shift has completely changed, where now I completely feel that has brought this love and this empathy now that I have for others. And so I really do look at it, this from broken to beautiful. And we developed this course that helps individuals learn this principle. It's something we all need to understand. And the healing and the peace and the strength and the hope that has come from this is incredible. I'm looking at a picture of a butterfly that I have here in our office. And we tend to look at the beauty of this butterfly in this majesty, but we forget what it went through to become a butterfly. And, that chrysalis, that it had to develop and it had to work and it had to get overcome to become this beautiful, beautiful creature. And so that's really what Broken to Beautiful is all about, because that's within. We just need to understand that it's there.
Yeah, I can relate to your son with the scars, because with all the operations that I had, I used to have the scar from my right ear to my left, or, vice versa, because that's where they, had to open the skull to, work on my skull and, reconstruct my face and everything. So I used to have that. And like you're saying, with your son, I used to have, and I still do at times, have the, hair really short and everything. But because of all the operations that they did, they were able to, I guess, pull the skin together so much that it's not, you can still feel it at times, but it's not really as obvious as it was when I was younger.
But at the same time, Dorsey, it's a reminder. And that's what scars should be for all of us, is a reminder of overcoming. Like Annette talked about the butterfly. It used to be that maybe if we saw something that was broken, what would we do? We'd just throw it away. It would be something that we'd just go buy a new one. Well, when it comes to ourselves, whether it's physically or emotionally or spiritually, we can't just throw ourselves away. And when we are able to overcome the difficulties that we have, like our son was able to overcome his difficulties, that's when we saw some real beauty in him. That's when we see beauty in all people. That's when we see beauty in you, is when we can see that people have done everything that they needed to in order to overcome so that they could move on and become better than they ever were before. That's why we talk about from broken to beautiful, is because it's such an important concept. The concept of being broken, sometimes people just say, I'm broken, there's nothing that can be done, this is just the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. But when people make that conscious effort to become better instead of bitter, that's when we see some beautiful, beautiful things happen.
Right. With all that you have been through and have overcome, you've overcome your own sadness and your own trauma. The Bible tells us that we will experience, trials and tribulations in our own lives. How can you live a life of fulfillment given all the heartache that you've experienced in your life?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Dorothy. It's a good question too, though, and I know that Annette's got some thoughts on this, but just quickly, how do you overcome? How do you become better? I think of stories. You just referenced the Bible, and one of my favorite Bible stories is Daniel. You remember when we think about Daniel, he was thrown into the lion's den, and sometimes we forget that it wasn't the fact that God saved him from going into the lion's den. He saved him while he was in the lion's den. And that's what we have to find within ourselves as well, is that when we recognize that there are lion's dens that we find ourselves in at different times of our lives, we have an opportunity of overcoming. But we can't stress enough the importance of the action that's necessary for that person to overcome whatever they're dealing with. And that's why we feel as strongly as we do about our personal ministry with Cairn the Load is, and it's like you said, if there's only one person that gained some perspective of what we had to say and what we shared, then it was all worth it. But it does start within. And you do have to ask yourself that question. There's probably two questions we have to ask ourselves every day. The first question is, have I found joy in my life? And the second question is, have others found joy in my life?
Right. And, I think about this question, Dorsey, and for me, it's a conscious decision to find that joy. But yet also to be very honest and realistic and to acknowledge that there is pain and there is sadness, but that I'm not meant to stay in that pain and sadness, but to feel it, to allow it to go through me. It wasn't long after our son had passed away, and I was on a walk one day, and there was a woman that we know that her son had passed away about a year before our son did, and he had an overdose, and which is so sad, and it's a completely different type of situation and death, but you still have this loss. And I still remember this day, and I'm out there, and it's the morning time, and she stops me, and I stopped and said hello, and we were just chatting, and then all of a sudden she said to me, "How can you live this lie?" And I said, "What?" It just kind of caught me off guard. And she said, "You're living a lie." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, you have a smile on your face. I've heard you laugh. How can you do that? Your son died." And I still remember telling her, and I just said, it's a choice. He doesn't want me to be miserable. He wants me to, my son wants me to continue to live and to be happy. I said, "You don't see me when I'm home and I'm crying and I'm, really going through a difficult time because I'm missing him. But it's a choice to continue to live." But I also acknowledge the sadness and the sorrow. It's just that I knew that I couldn't let myself stay there. I needed to go through that. I needed to feel that. I still feel that sorrow today, over 10 years later, but I don't stay there. And so I have found that a key to me being happy, and I found this long ago before our son passed away, was to get out and serve someone else. And whether it was a neighbor and I took a plate of cookies over, or I just knocked on the door and said hello, or maybe we said, "Let's go to lunch." It wasn't much, but it was me getting out of myself. And honestly, this is something that we have just, taken forward in Cairn the Load. And we realized when God told us, "You need to share your message," we thought, how? How do we do this? We don't spend all this time on social media. We don't know how to do a podcast. All these things. And when God asks you to do something, you figure out how and you do it. And so that's what we've done. And I pray every day that the message for the day is what one of his children need.
Yeah. Same thing, when my mom passed away, I knew, and I was in Bible college at the time, the end of the semester, going into the holidays, and, I knew that my mom wouldn't have wanted me to quit. I knew that she wouldn't have wanted me to give up. So I was able to go home. I did was part of the funeral, and the next week or a week and a half, I came back and I finished up the semester, did the, finals, and I kept on going.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of choice sometimes. Actually, you really do have a lot of choice. But here's what we found, and it kind of comes down to this, is that you don't find happiness, you make happiness. And too often, I think we're just waiting for that happiness to come our way. And it doesn't happen. We have to consciously make that effort to to be happy. And here's the thing, Dorsey, you can find happiness in so many different places, but the one place it's hard to find is just by yourself. Get out and do things. Find people that you can serve. Find people that you can bless their lives. And as you do that, that's one of the things that keeps us going, as we talked about before. It's just the fact that we see so many people who struggle, and we encourage them to do the same thing. Once you feel better about yourself, go out and help others to feel better.
Yeah, sometimes, when we're going through, an emotional time or, a spiritual time and difficulty, sometimes we need tools that we may need to help to mend and heal those, emotions and those things within us. And, they're always developing. What are the tools that we need to start to heal in that journey?
Well, one, I believe, is you need a tool of a listening heart, and to surround yourself with those who can lift you up, who accept you as you are. I mean, those are all wonderful tools. There's professional tools, there's resources, but we have created tools based upon our experiences and things that helped us in our lives. I think sometimes when we go through difficult things, we lose sight of who we are. And I know after our son died, even though I had other children and, Mark and I, we'd been married for a long time and we had this family, all of a sudden I didn't know who I was, because for so long I was a caregiver. And it's like, okay, now I'm not a caregiver. I don't have to worry about always being around to take, to help our son and to do these things. Who am I? And I didn't know. And it took some searching and going in. We have a gift for all the listeners that not only can they schedule a free discovery call with us, they can also, they have access. It's called the Finding Me workbook. And it takes you through some steps. It asks questions, and it will help you find, who are you? Not who does the world think you should be, but who are you within you? Your spirit, your soul. Who are you? And what do you want to be? What are those goals, those innate goals within you? And so we have tools like that.
When I think of tools, I think of a tool belt, or I think of a tool chest. And the more tools that you have, the more apt you are to be able to be what you want to be, or to create what you want to create. And Annette mentioned the Finding Me workbook that we offer for free to all of our listeners there, and we'll talk about that at the end as to how they can access that. But the tools that are surrounding us, as Annette mentioned, not only are professionally, and not only are just those friends and family members around us there, but some of the greatest tools are tools that others have shared before. Whether they're books, whether they're spiritual books like the Bible. The Bible and the Scriptures help us to recognize. There are times that I've read a particular scripture in the Bible so many times, and I'll read it the 100th time, and it means something different to me. And I think that we sometimes think that the tools that we're looking for are just going to be right there in front of us. And sometimes they are. Sometimes we have to dig deep. But having that shovel to dig deep into the scriptures, or into what others have written about the same situations, are really critical to our ability to master ourselves and be who we want to be.
Another tool that has been really powerful is that of meditation. And it's hard. It was hard for me to start meditating, because there were so many things in my head. And I would think of one thing, and then I'd think of another thing, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. But to teach myself that it was okay to be still, that it was okay just to feel. And I believe that we overschedule our lives so we don't have to feel. And it's such a powerful thing to feel and to allow ourselves just to be still. And so that really has become a great tool.
That's one of our favorite tools, in fact. Just being able to go outside maybe and go sit on the back porch on a quiet evening. Leave the phones inside, leave all the social media inside, and just socially distance yourself from electronics. But it's amazing, Dorsey, when you're sitting by yourself, the things that come into your mind that would have never been there before, because Annette is absolutely right. There are some times in our lives that we overprogram ourselves, and we live in an overprogrammed society. You don't have to go very far, whether it's children or adults, to see that you're sitting outside on a beautiful day, and what do people do? They're sitting there on their telephone. They're not seeing the things that are there that really bring joy, happiness, and the ability to contemplate about those things that are truly important. And so, maybe that's our last tool that we talk about here, but it's probably one of the most important tools that we talk about. The fact that we need to just listen. We've got so much going on around us. We just need to listen sometimes.
Yeah. You talked about earlier, you mentioned the word identity. Is it possible at times to lose our identity? And if we do, how do we find ourselves, or how do we get our identity back?
Wow, that's a really important question. And identity is really critical. If ever it was, it's probably more critical today because of the fact that we have had to change so much during the last 16, 17 months of our lives because of COVID. And when we look at identity, first thing we need to remember is that we're all God's children. And that there's nothing that makes me more important or less important than somebody else. And when we recognize that fact that I am a child of God, that He's placed me here upon earth to learn certain things that I need to learn in my life so that I can be more serviceable, so that I can be more apt to be able to help others around me, that's when I begin to feel and identify who I truly am. Sometimes you hear of situations that occur that identify a person for something that they did. I think of a baseball star, I won't mention his name, back in the 1960s, he was a Rookie of the Year, he was a Cy Young Pitcher of the Year, and he had some great expectations. Well, during the off season, there was a crime that was committed that involved forgery, and he never played baseball again. And it wasn't the fact that people remember him because he was such a great player that first rookie season, and that he was the best pitcher. That rarely, if ever happens when you have a rookie that is not only the best rookie, but also the best pitcher in the entire league. But people don't remember him for that. They remember him for some of the bad things that he did. And I think sometimes we have to be careful that we don't put ourselves in a position where people don't remember us because of what we've done good. We're our own worst enemy sometimes. We put ourselves in a position where if we don't do something right, we label ourselves. And all of a sudden, we become that person that we've labeled ourselves to be.
One of the things, that's really an interesting story. But the thing I keep thinking, Dorsey, is as children of God and our identity, it's not what we do or don't do in His eyes that really lessens that worth. We come with that worth and as His children, but there are things that happen in life that break us, whether it's poor choices like this baseball player, whether it's abuse, whether it's a death of a loved one, or whether it's simply, and I don't want to just say simply because I deal with this, anxiety and depression, those things affect our ability to feel. And I think because let me just explain it this way. I didn't want to feel the pain. And so I wanted to numb myself. And so I just decided, well, I don't want to feel the pain. So if I don't feel, I'm not going to feel the pain. But when I made that choice to not feel, I couldn't just numb out the negative, the pain. I also numbed out the love. I numbed out the joy. And I lost my identity to a degree because I thought that, these things over here that happened as a child made me less than, or I identified myself as one who had been abused. Well, that's not my identity. And so it took me learning and healing and putting those pieces back together to truly understand my identity.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And, I think overall, most importantly, when we are Christians and people of faith, our identity, needs to be in Christ. And then, we ourselves need to know, who we are as well.
Yes.
What is the most valuable piece of life knowledge that you've learned along your journey?
That we're not alone.
There's so many. There are so many pieces that we've learned along the way, and every day we learn more.
Mm-hmm.
And once you realize that you've stopped learning, you stop growing. And we continue to grow. It's been 10 years since we lost our son. But in those 10 years, we've continued to grow. We've continued to progress. We've learned patience. We've learned greater love. We've learned the importance of togetherness. Annette and I are stronger today than we were even a few years ago because we've learned that the most important person that we can help other than ourselves is the person that's next to us, the person that is close to us, maybe a parent if it's not our spouse or significant other, maybe it's a child, maybe it's our siblings. But relationships is so critical. And for me, when I think of the things that I've learned, I would have to say, Annette, that relationships is the most important, and how relationships is to our own individual growth as we learn from others and have the ability to gain their wisdom. I'm a lot more social now than I used to be.
And I think that's really one of the key things that we have learned. It's so important. We came to Earth to be connected to, not to go through life alone, but to go through life loving, serving, and lifting one another. And if I can help someone in their journey travel through their wilderness of life, then that's so powerful. Another thing, if I can add one more thing that I think that we've learned, that I have learned, is the tragedy isn't, sometimes we go through experiences that are really tragic. And you look at, whether we are diagnosed with a health disease is going to be chronic and you're going to live with certain things, or you have a death of a child, or, the list goes on and on and on. The real tragedy comes if we don't learn from those experiences, if we don't become better, if we don't, and as Christians, if we don't become closer to Christ and learn to rely on Him, that's the tragedy. And so for me, that's the big aha, is that, we can go through these experiences. It's not the experience itself that is, the worst thing in life. The worst thing is if we don't allow ourselves to learn.
You don't grow because of the experience. You grow because, it's strange to say, and I understand what you're saying, Annette, there, but it's not the experience itself that we grow, but we grow because of the experience, not in spite of the experience. And that's a real key consideration. It's all about finding the joy that is sometimes elusive in life, that comes by our making a conscious effort.
So, Dorsey, I hope that made sense to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. That was fine. As we get ready to end, the last question would be: is there an encouragement word or inspirational quote that you guys have, or that you guys use to, inspire and to encourage others, and what would that be for my guest today?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things we could say. There are others that have said it better than we could ever say. Mm-hmm. And one of the poems I love, it goes like this. It says, "We have to believe in happiness, or happiness never comes. We look beyond the clouds and see the shining sun. We have to believe the buds will grow, believe in the grass below the snow. That is the reason a bird can sing on the darkest day, because he believes in spring."
Mark's the one that has all the quotes and poems memorized. And, for me, I would just say simply, you're not alone. Someone understands and has been there on your journey. It may not look exactly the same, but they understand. And together, we can be stronger. You don't have to do this alone.
Embrace the detours in life. Mm-hmm. The trail isn't always going to be straight and narrow. It's going to sometimes have some treacherous areas that we have to traverse, and we need to embrace that.
Exactly. Look at the fork in the road, and sometimes, quite often, actually, you're going to take the one less traveled. And really, there's beauty. There is beauty that lies within that pain.
And then, how can people get in touch with you, and where can they find your information?
They can go to brokentobeautiful.net, and they have access to us right there. They can find us on any of the podcast platforms that they use to listen to their podcast, their favorite podcast, this one, Dorsey, of yours, and look under Trail Angels to listen to podcast, or Instagram at Cairn the Load, Facebook at Cairn the Load. But any of those sites, you can actually find us, and there are links in the bios that you can connect personally with us there too, and receive that Finding Me workbook. It really is. It's a journey to get to know yourself and who you want to be. And this life is a journey, and it's a beautiful journey. And so we want to be there and help you along your journey.
Awesome. Well, Mark and Annette, thank you again for joining me today. I greatly appreciate having you on the show.
It's been a great pleasure for us to be with you. We've heard your story. We had you on our podcast, and we are going to have you on our podcast, and we're looking forward to that as we've read your story, and as we recognize the things that you've been able to achieve in your life because of being able to make decisions.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Well, guys, thank you again for joining us on another episode of the Dorsey Ross Show, and keep watching, keep listening, keep sharing, and until next time, have a great day. God bless.
Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. Please like, share, and tell others about the show. Also, please check out the other podcast episodes. And if you would like, donate to this podcast and buy Dorsey a coffee. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.